So thanks for joining us. This is episode 16 of the We Are CC podcast. I'm Poppy, and I am covering on the intro, as most of you probably know, for Tom Crown. Tom Crown came off of a marathon stream earlier today. He woke up and he felt inspired to do a very long one because of the market conditions. And it was pretty good, but that is tiring, and he is recovering. And I'm joined by a guy who needed to borrow $100 in Bitcoin. Wait, that's $90. No, sorry, $75 in Bitcoin. Mr. And just a reminder, if you want to visit us and download any earlier podcasts, we do upload them all to podcast.buzzsprout.com, or you can Google us. All right, mister, no surprise, the first thing, you probably hear me sigh there. The first thing we're going to talk about is always Bitcoin. But
yeah, I think it's on everyone's mind, right? It's on our mind.
It is, it's a beautiful chart if you're a bear. I know the bears are having parties right now. Yeah. So right now, what we are looking at is basically a chart that's blown through a few levels, a few key support levels, right? So we started today. Let's look real quick. I know we normally don't get into price action, but this has been wild. This is honestly has been setting some records even, right? Isn't this now tying even for the most consecutive red weeks for Bitcoin? If we close this week, I think it's a new record. It'll be 7 weeks red?
Yeah, it's. I think it's clear we've been in the bear market, right? And just seeing a little bit of a shakeout right now. I think in terms of records too, I wonder if we have any intraday records kind of being challenged at this point.
Well, yeah, looking at some of the other data. So I was looking at inflows. So when you say inflows, that's people moving Bitcoins to an exchange. Usually that's associated with selling, right? It's been at record lows. We're talking 8-year lows until today, past couple of days. Today's inflows are at levels last seen in May of 2021. So that gives you an idea. The market is essentially at a similar kind of capitulation point where you're seeing, some cascading liquidations. You're seeing a lot of investors that are scared by what they're seeing and deciding that, they don't want to hold it anymore, or maybe they can sell it now and try to buy in at a better price. Whatever the reason may be, you are seeing a very significant uptick. I think it's 150% increase in inflows the past 24 hours. And then from a price perspective, it's not the scariest thing for Bitcoin. I say only an 11% drop in price today, but that's really on the back of, in the past week, a 24% drop, and in the past 2 weeks, about a 40% drop. So it's understandably a lot of people are stressed and frustrated and wondering where the bottom is. When's the floor going to appear?
I guess that's the big question, right? Where the floor is. I think it might be worth mentioning for anybody that's looking at this price action or has been in a short position. It's so hard to call these bottoms. Even looking at my different charts that I've drawn myself, I tend to be kind of long-term. I look a little bit more at the macro and really use long-dated historical levels and liquidity zones. What's really interesting is that we've kind of just blown through all the support levels I have on my charts, the historical liquidity zones, like there was one right around what is this, 36.5 to about almost to about 38,000. We just sliced right through that. Now we're really looking at challenging a liquidity zone around the 32,000 mark, down to about the 29,000 mark. So we're right in a zone right now that is a critical support zone. It's a liquidity zone. So expecting a lot of traffic here. In terms of calling a bottom, so tough. Would have previously called a bottom in my higher liquidity zone. But now that we're in this one, we've potentially may start to kind of cool off in the bearish price action. But for anybody in the short, because these bottoms are so hard to call, and because Bitcoin tends to reverse course pretty quickly, be very careful with your shorts. Make sure that you manage your risk, and make sure you're keeping an eye on things. And if you are using stop losses, make sure that you have that at an adequate level so you don't get wrecked. Anybody that's in a short right now, congratulations, good job, you called it. I don't know if it was so hard to call, to be quite honest, but I think, just manage your risk, y'all.
Yeah, that should go without saying. We always talk about that every week. And I know I have seen some really beautiful shorts out there. I've also seen a lot of people talking about buying back in. Here's another piece of advice. So one, yes, on shorts, make sure you got a stop loss, because as often happens when you have these big movements down, they can sometimes very often be followed by very big candles in the reverse direction. If you remember May of last year, that first big move down was followed by a complete bullish engulfing candle, I believe, over the next day. So even for people that got in at the start of the move and thought, okay, I'm going to just kind of hold this, they still either got liquidated or closed their trade, at a loss. So when you're looking at buying, so a lot of people are talking about bear markets, right? Some people were not sure if we were in a bear or not. And I think you did have a chance. Looking at the chart, I think we did have a chance to recover. And then we kind of had another rejection in the past couple of weeks off of some key resistance levels. And so if this is clearly kind of now looking very bearish, so we went from moderately bearish to very bearish, in my opinion. And so if you're looking at an investment strategy to carry you through the coming days, weeks, months, my number one tip is if you're buying spot and you're going to dollar cost average into positions, do it slowly. Do not run in and say, I'm going to spend 50% of my free investable money, this week, just because it's low. Because you might do that and then it might nuke down, another 20, 30%. And especially if you're buying alts, that's going to be amplified. Your losses will most likely be amplified. Not always the case, but very often, right?
That's good advice. It's at the risk of not being able to call the bottom, or maybe having to buy next week, for example, at a little bit of a higher price. But really, the whole DCA thing, the golden rule is you do not try to catch any sort of price action, right? Don't try to predict that. The whole point of DCA is that you can smooth out your risk, is that you can smooth out your price average. So really, if you're in DCA mode, my guiding light on that, at least for me, is it should be independent of price, right? Sure, if you want to ape into some Bitcoin right now or any other, altcoin, that's totally valid. But if you're on a DCA play, then really the price has no bearing on what you're going to be doing. It just means that when we're down, your DCA just buys you more on the weekly, monthly, whatever your frequency is.
Yep. Although I have heard some strategies, there's so many ways to DCA. I've heard some strategies, for example, some people wait, every, say, 5% move down, they just buy more. Some people have been doing that since 69K. They just say every time Bitcoin goes down 5%, I go and I do another dollar cost average buy. That's kind of cool. That makes sense.
Oh, that's an interesting play. Yeah, for sure. I see that.
I'm the kind of guy that just likes to allocate a little bit each paycheck. Makes it easier for me. I don't have to think about it. To go with this news, so we talked about Terra in the past. I remember we had a pretty good conversation about stablecoins, in fact, maybe 2 podcasts ago. And so as most people know, Do Kwon and the Terra Foundation have been buying billions of dollars in Bitcoin. I think they were one of the top holders, in fact. And this was to basically to provide confidence in their stablecoin, right? It wasn't required as part of the ecosystem. It was basically extra collateral there to support the project in case the stablecoin became unpegged, meaning, if it loses its value of 1-to-1 with the US dollar.
Which it just did, actually.
Yeah, and there's risks. There's risks with a lot of things in the space, and this was another one where we did kind of note that there's a bit of elevated risk there. Where, hey, this is new. They're really trying to lure in a lot of investors with really high APRs, and so it's kind of an unproven newer stable coin. There's a risk element there, and like you said, Mister, what happened today? I think you actually maybe you saw worse. I saw that Terra right now. Is it still at 93 cents at the moment? I have to find it.
And even at 93 cents, it's so hard to verify data that you see on socials, right? But folks been freaking out about the UST peg having been lost. I think it's twice now in the past 48 hours. That's a little bit concerning. Especially because it's still off peg right now. Do you have the current price?
Yeah, it is. This is now, keep in mind, each exchange that has their own supply of UST, and they each may report something slightly different. Looking at Coinbase, it was as low as 91.3 cents. It's currently sitting at 93.6 cents, which means they're at least, they at least got to get up to what, 98, 99. That's a reasonable range. Even for other stable coins, they'll sometimes very briefly wick in a direction like that, because stable coins aren't, there's different methods of maintaining that peg. So it's not just magically always at $1. It's going to fluctuate, by fractions of a cent all the time, every minute, every hour. But what it shouldn't do is drop almost 10 cents below $1. That's a bad sign.
But the good news is it's recovering, right? And the recovery is a little bit slower than I think would be nice to see. But you're right. When we see that kind of deviation from the $1 peg, it's very concerning, because with other stable coins that have dipped that low, it doesn't stop at 10%, right? It tends to go. And I think that really also may possibly speak to the strength of the Terra and the Luna community, kind of helping prop this up. Because the worst case scenario is you lose a peg, you see a 10% off peg, and it starts panic, right? And that panic can just snowball into essentially a bank run. So it's good that we're not seeing that right now. And I would imagine that it's all that BTC that Terra is liquidating currently. That's helping to, kind of reverse, or at least instill a bit more confidence back in USD.
Yeah, I think you're being a little bit less alarmist than me. So maybe that, and that's important, right? We don't want to get emotional at times like this. Emotionally trading, even when you're looking at potential capitulation days like we have today, when you're looking at a lot of scary news, just pause, catch your breath, and think critically, logically about, your next move before you say maybe close a trade out at a loss or something. In this case, that's what the Bitcoin was there for, right? Now, obviously, we don't like to hear that someone's going to have to sell, or probably from what we're seeing that they did sell. The word I got was that they sold maybe like 30 minutes ago. They sold $1.5 billion of Bitcoin, which might have been what sent us to this range we're in now, lower 30s. But we will probably want to confirm that. So thank you to Urberg33K. He sent me a link to that. So we'll check on that and get back to that. But yeah, I really do hope that they recover that peg, because nothing's scarier than, being in a DeFi protocol and then the stable coin that you're in is kind of shaky.
For me, I think it all comes down to sustainability. Nothing here is financial advice, of course, but I think there is a fundamental mismatch in basically the economics within the Terra ecosystem. In terms of sustainability, it's a matter of being able to generate enough revenue from loans to actually sustain the emissions, the rewards that are being emitted to give everyone those high APRs. which is what's attracting folks. The problem I think Terra is seeing right now is that they really do have a great adoption rate. They have a lot of users, they have a lot of TVL, but the problem is there's just not enough revenue coming from the loans. Hopefully, there's enough time for the powers that be over there to really focus on generating more revenue, to really be able to sustain the high APRs that are being given out right now. But even the APRs are going to be dropping, right, and continue to drop in order to make sure that they get closer to quote unquote sustainable. So I think that's something to watch, is just where the ecosystem is focusing its marketing efforts. Is it in attracting new players? Is it new holders, new users? Or is it in generating more loan volume? And I would hope to see them start to focus on generating more loan volume.
Good input. I guess we'll see. I don't think this is the end of Terra. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I'm sure they're going to get the peg back up, but we'll be keeping an eye on it. Some final comments on this section. I do think this is important to note, and we didn't really highlight this, but when you look at the charts for Bitcoin, what triggered a lot of folks to flip bearish, and they may not even realize it, when we broke under, let's see, what was the price here? We broke under around 37.5 when we broke under that, and then again when we closed under 33.1. Both of those basically validated what we call a breakdown in the market structure, meaning we were in an uptrend before that. We were in an uptrend since basically January. When we lost those levels, now we are setting a lower low on the chart. And you can see what happens once that lower low kind of triggered, it just kind of got amplified and got worse. So now the key is trying to identify what that new pattern is. And there is a downtrend. There's a historical downtrend that extends from last September, October, that it looks like we may be falling back into.
So are you saying bear market confirmed?
I'm saying that the predominant pattern when you look at it right now is that downtrend. We had rallied and we had a chance to invalidate that uptrend. Basically, we came to the end of the pattern. The uptrend failed to set a high. Actually, it was right around 47.5. When we got rejected there, that's when we started to fall back into this pattern. So where that downtrend goes and where it finds a floor and where we reverse, you're going to get a lot of answers on that, a lot of different perspectives. But I do think for today's price action, it does look like things are hopefully starting to relax a little bit. So if you're in a short, might not be bad to take a little profit. So we're going to do something fun this week because we realized that, the market's a little bit stressful. So let's have a little bit of fun. We are going to revisit the past year in RCC, and we are going to talk about the top upvoted posts in RCC in the order of, highest to lowest. And there was actually a lot of fun things. It was kind of like a trip through memory lane here through this cycle. A lot of ups and downs. So I was surprised that the very first one, the highest voted with 38,800 upvotes submitted by Qatar Secular, is AOC reveals she doesn't hold Bitcoin because she wants to be an unbiased lawmaker. This was from just a few months ago in December. You know what, mister? I think I can respect that. I know that some politicians, right, you've seen it a lot more, I think, in the past year than maybe ever before, which is politicians building a platform around cryptocurrency, and they're clearly holders. Would you rather your politician hold crypto because then they're invested and maybe they understand it better, or would you rather they avoid it just like, avoiding investing in stocks?
Regardless of my or anyone's position, I think on AOC or whichever party affiliation you might have, I do think that this is a reasonable stance that AOC is taking. For anybody that's been listening to this podcast for a while, hopefully, you've come to get a sense for who we are and kind of the way we lean. the way I usually look at things is kind of more from an idealistic perspective and really trying to build and push us towards a more fair and just future because clearly we're not living in that world right now. And from that perspective of idealism, I think it really should be that politicians aren't in it to make money. And in fact, it should be, when I say should be, in my opinion, I think that it's best when politicians are doing it out of a sense of duty. It's almost a labor of love that they are so passionate about making a difference and helping the people, right? They should be okay with not holding any positions, right? Whether it's crypto or it's equities, stocks, what have you. I think she's taken a good position. The vast majority of politicians, they do trade actively with the information they have. It is really a gray area because at what point do you consider it insider trading? If we look at kind of the trend, certainly in the US, if not globally, it's the realization that folks are waking up to this realization that, hey, our politicians, like we've always joked about them just being kind of corrupt and crooks and, just in it for the money, but we're actually getting data now, right? We can see these politicians making money off the privileged information that they have. And that, I think, is getting a pushback in a big way. That's what I see, at least. So really, the position that AOC has taken, I think, is just kind of the start of like a new trend, hopefully, within U.S. politics, at least.
I would prefer that. I mean, you can see that list of politicians that had just incredible performance in the stock market last year. It's sickening. They do better than hedge funds. I'm sure that's not related to insider.
Yeah, it's maddening is the way I would put it.
Well,
like we should be mad.
Well, you really want to get mad. So the people that are tanking the markets right now, and they need to, right? They need to cool the markets off. The complexities of macroeconomics. I'm not an economist, but these are things that kind of have to happen, right? As they tackle inflation. So the Fed, the U.S. Fed, if you remember last year, they announced, hey, we are going to ban our officials from trading stocks, bonds, etc. And everyone was like, wow, that's great. They announced that October. And then do you remember what came a mere 2 weeks later when they announced, hey, we're going to be raising rates? Now, keep in mind, raising rates, 100% professional investors know that this is going to tank speculative markets. It's going to tank equities. It's going to tank crypto, everything else, right? So 2 weeks after they say, hey, we're going to ban ourselves from trading. Oh, and by the way, we're going to have to raise rates. And then guess when that actually went into effect? When do you think that law went into effect?
4 weeks ago.
It went into effect about maybe 1 or 2 weeks before they actually announced the first rate rise in March.
Well, good for them. I guess they timed the market wrapped up in a policy decision. So they're kind of indemnified against any kind of accusations of, calling it ahead of time. I would imagine, they're probably sitting pretty right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
But, I think a lot of conspiracy theories can be born of that, for sure.
Some conspiracy theories and some just kind of a painful reality.
Absolutely.
So the number 2, I mean, these are just for the past year, so going back to May of 2021. So the number 2 most upvoted post was 37,800 upvotes. It's been a crazy ride these past 7 years, but I'm selling. And this is from Bitcoin Hadzija. And they had me for a second. I was very curious when I read this. I thought this was someone who's been in basically from the early days of crypto. So they got to be loaded. I click on it and and it was basically a beautiful troll post. They put up an advertisement for their 2009 BMW M3 and selling it for 0.3 Bitcoin. How that post became the number 2 post on RCC, that's the part that kind of blows me away. There's like no substance to it. It's just the guy trolling everyone, and it's number 2.
Yeah, I remember that post. The way I saw it was it's definitely trolling. It was a FUD post, man, and it got upvoted so crazy. I think maybe it's just trying to kind of tap into maybe a nascent kind of sentiment out there that everybody really does have this in the back of their mind, though. I'm a holder, I'm hodling, but I am worried about a market crash. I am worried about, ecosystem health, right? And what is the future? For me, though, I don't know. I really think that it is a lot of fun because when it talks about the mild usage, depreciating to zero value and barely gets used, those are really common FUD points. Because if you fast forward a year now, the ecosystem is in a vastly different place, right? With all the adoption we're seeing with Lightning adoption, especially, and with the renewed development on these L2s, it's all really promising right now. So I tend to not agree with it, but I think it is interesting to see how many upvotes it got kind of as a proxy for maybe the less vocal sentiment that's out there, right? Even from crypto natives. But hey, if you're still selling that M3, that's a beautiful E46 there for 0.3 BTC, hit me up. That's a good deal.
Yeah, you just got a nice discount on that today.
I'll pick it up for sure. That's a great car.
This is the part that actually makes me happy when I think about where we are today. I know not everyone, there's a lot of people that, depending on your position, you may not be as happy. Maybe you're underwater a lot. But even if that's the case, the buying opportunities that you're going to see today and going forward until the market reverses, until we find some strength in bulls, there's a lot of buying opportunities. And if there's good projects that you're really into, that's the part that I'm really pumped about, because I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, man, this price decline is brutal, but this is an active project. The development's ongoing. The community is really, really cool, really active. Like this is one that I think in the next cycle is going to be a performer. And I'm super pumped to just kind of chill out and just slowly start accumulating positions in these. Is it just me? I mean, do you feel that way too, mister?
I love a good sale, man. So yes, I feel the same way. I'm looking at the price action and all I see is entry opportunities, to be honest. Of course, not financial advice, right? For me, I think it is healthy because all markets have been running so hot, right? And I hate to be the negative Nancy and the somewhat bear on this podcast, but it's been super hot. We've needed a correction and it is healthy for markets. It sucks for anybody that's in a leveraged position that got wiped out or is at risk of getting wiped out. But for all the spot players out there, I think it is really presenting an opportunity here for an entry.
Yeah, it definitely is. Just make smart choices. There's a lot of stuff that's never going to recover. Not everything is going to pull a Doge or a SHIB or a whatever, that's also, like you said, that's one of the perks, right? When you have these down markets, these bear markets, it kind of cuts some of that excess waste from the market. So congrats.
Yeah, and it cools things down. It gets. Sorry to cut you off, but it really starts to. The reason I say it's healthy is because having too much bias on the bull side. It's great to see the chart right going to the moon, but really that's not healthy, right? You need a balanced market. You need voices on both sides. And so hopefully what this is doing is also resetting folks kind of mentally as far as their perspective, their bullish perspective, but also their bearish perspective. When you start to get movements as big as we're seeing in recent weeks, it really is a matter of just making sure that you are in a position to take advantage of price action and that you're not so over leveraged that you stay up at night and or you get wiped out, right? Because if you get wiped out, there's no way you can get back in, right? Or it will be painful to get back in. But for me, it's all about risk management. It's all about long term, and it's all about trying to get a sale on Bitcoin.
Yes, sir. It is. Fear and Greed is at 11. The index, Fear and Greed index. So for those who don't know, one of the ways you can describe markets is just waves up and down of fear and greed. When you get too fearful, when you want to take profit, you're afraid you're going to lose that money. That's when you start selling. The fear's kicked in, and then the price drops, right? Because people start to see that selling. They get afraid. They sell, and then at a certain point, though, it hits a price where people get greedy again. They like it, sends it back up. Fear and greed is at 11 though at the moment, which is pretty darn low. And you're talking about buy opportunities. There are some people out there who will base their investment strategy on where that peak fear is. And I believe I've seen a few comments. Don't quote me. I don't do this, but I've seen a few people say that around 10, 11 is when they start looking at buying in DCA. So,
and actually, on the hourly, seeing a nice little relief rally right now, trying to get back into a liquidity zone that I'd spoken about previously, right around 32. I think that's a good thing. We'll see where it goes.
Got my long open. I aped earlier.
Nice.
So don't tell the wife. I put our life savings in there.
Good luck, sir.
It's only $100.
Well, hey.
I don't know what's worse. That's my life savings, or that my wife's going to leave me in 4 hours when she finds out. The next buzz we're going to talk about, this is a little more recent, March of 22. So that makes this, in only a few months, this has reached the number 3, the number 3 most upvoted post on RCC in the past year. Russian soldiers surrendering to Ukraine will receive 5 million rubles worth of crypto. That was from March, from Meltdown myself. Thank you, sir. Or ma'am. Looking at that, I tried to find a little bit more information on it, but basically from the original post, what I saw was there was a TV announcer that mentioned this, and it appears to have been backed up to some degree by their defense minister, that Russians who surrender will get, at the time it was announced as $45,000 worth of rubles, or 5 million rubles. So, I wonder if did they adjust the price, because I'm pretty sure ruble is doing pretty bad these days.
Yeah, it's interesting the way they're going about it, because they don't really have that many Bitcoin at the end of the day. And I don't know how sustainable of an initiative this is, because what does that come out to? It's like 50,000-ish dollars worth of crypto or fiat. I can think of a lot better things that Ukraine could be spending their money on, but it's an interesting play. It is interesting that they're giving basically cash bounties for any Russian military defectors. And I think that just kind of shows where Ukraine's head's at, right? Their aggregate minds are at is, they're not only trying to push back physically with military might, but maybe this is kind of indicative of Ukraine realizing that, psyops are a thing. Russia is really great at psychological operations, psychological warfare. And maybe a campaign like this can really start to get folks that, and all I have are anecdotal, stories of, Russian soldiers that don't really want to be doing what they're doing, but they're too scared to push back, right? And, it could kind of spread that sentiment, through the battlefield. And I just have to wonder, like, whether or not it's sustainable for Ukraine. Like, they can really only support a few hundred soldiers worth, right? It's interesting that they're trying this PSYOPs approach.
Their supply of crypto has gone up since February. I know they have gotten more. Also, the ruble. So if you had gone back to February, that's when the ruble was just getting nuked. It was, they announced all those sanctions, and initially over a couple-week period, was it through all of February, I think the ruble dropped over 50%. It went from around, if you're looking at the ruble to the US dollar, it was around, 1 cent, 1.5 cents. Dropped all the way down to $0.006 dollars. I don't even know what that is. It's not much. But since then, this is the part. Again, I'm not an economist, so I don't know why. But the ruble rallied like 130% since then. And it's actually higher now than it has been since really, it looks like maybe 2020. Around 2020 was the last time it really was sitting around this range. So that's pretty wild. The ruble's made a spectacular recovery, all things considered.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. We'll see where they land.
Yeah, and I did notice too while I was looking up this news article that they were also offering rewards for turning in Russian equipment. So Russians could hand over Russian weapon systems, vehicles, rifles, artillery pieces, even warships. Ukraine had a bounty list of basically like, hey, if you turn in an entire warship, entire massive boat, we'll give you like up to $100,000 worth of whatever. Might be in fiat, might be in crypto. That's pretty wild.
That is wild.
I don't know how they'd pull it off, and then they'd offer to take and help you get a visa and residency in a third country that's not Ukraine or Russia. So probably better for like the single guys. If you have family back home, I'm not sure you would take that. But yeah, it is interesting. By the injection of crypto into that conflict has really given them some new angles to play with. So the next vote, and as an older but still millennial, this one I like. 29,800 upvotes. Britney Spears has been using Bitcoin since 2014 to hide purchases from her dad. I remember this, and I thought that was the craziest news. I was like, this is exactly the kind of stuff that people should be using Bitcoin for, right? If nothing else. I mean, it helps you get around the centralized finance system. It helps you. I mean, if you have some reason to hide, whether it's your crazy father that's controlling your life or your government, it gives you ways to have that financial freedom. What's the term you like to use, mister?
Oh, yeah. I think it just really speaks to Brittany being able to maintain her own sovereignty on her own wealth, right? It's that sovereignty on your wealth principle that I think we're all here to champion, right?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's exactly what it is. There's a lot if you're privileged enough to not be in a position where you need to worry about that. Maybe it's hard to understand why that's so significant, but for someone in her situation, which if you followed that court case, that sounded pretty awful.
Oh man,
honestly.
I was following it. It seemed like she was living a nightmare, and shout out to Jamie Spears. We'd love to have you on this podcast to understand your perspective on crypto and Bitcoin, especially in light of your daughter, sir, using Bitcoin to hide purchases from you. But
forget that. I want Brittany. Get Brittany on here.
Let's get them both on here. But yeah, I think she's been afraid of him, right? And can you imagine having to worry about being afraid of your dad, being afraid of your family, not being able to do what what many consider your God-given right, like to run her own life. Mm-hmm. I think they blocked her from having children and having more children, right? What a crazy place to be. I
don't think she had any real freedoms. Like they had complete control over her, even medically. They could put her on drugs, and they did. So kudos and mad respect to her. I don't know if anyone ever actually came, like if she ever came out and said, yeah, this is verified. It sounds like it's very probable. It's one of those things that hit the news and then kind of faded away. But I could absolutely believe this with everything that was going on in her life.
Well, the irony there, though, because BTC is so easy to track, right? I mean, it's very possible Jamie Spears has no clue how to even, look up the Bitcoin price, let alone track her.
He's a boomer, man. He doesn't. I apologize to the boomers listening. I love you guys.
Yeah, no offense.
I want your money. Please buy Bitcoin. I just hope, I'm waiting for her new album, man. That's all I want. Like the millennial in me is like, come on, one more album from Britney Spears, and I'm ready. Then she can retire. I can take
let's go collab with Britney Spears and BTS. Ultimate millennial collab.
So the next one doesn't surprise me. 1 year ago, someone named Hot Dog Dudson got 28,800 upvotes on a post about Elon Musk. I remember this one because this was around like the peak frustration with Elon, and we in crypto have such a short memory. I see it all the time, and sometimes it's so frustrating. You'll be like, hey, does anyone remember when Axie Infinity had a $500 million hack? No, you probably forgot until I just mentioned it again. Could you imagine any other company or corporation losing $500 million and the rest of the world forgets about it 2 weeks later? Yeah, welcome to crypto. So Elon, the title of this was Elon Musk his effect on crypto is completely exaggerated by the press, and soon his tweets will have no impact on price. The sooner the fanboys realize this, the better. And then he put a link to a news article that kind of went back and looked at some of this. Now, with a fellow analyst, we did go back and look at some of Elon's tweets and correlated that to some of the price action. And we also looked at some of the possible inflows, outflows that may have stemmed from him. There are some kind of suspect movements and timing there. There are times where Elon would tweet something at a key level, like a key resistance level, and suddenly he'd be like, oh, here, let me tweet about this, let me tweet about Bitcoin or Doge, and then boom, there's a nice big green candle, and you're like, I don't know that that's a coincidence. The man's smart. I mean, the man did work on PayPal, so he obviously has some understanding of like the financial side. I don't know how deep into the finances he gets, but clearly he's the richest or one of the richest men in the world. So, I mean, he's not a stupid person. We can agree there. Did he do this maliciously? I don't know.
I don't think it was malicious, man. Elon's operating on a different level. He's operating in a world that you and I just can't even comprehend, in my opinion, right? The only thing that we can comprehend is we cannot comprehend his world. When you have that sort of money, you're free of really almost any rules, regulations, even maybe, etiquette and societal norms, right? So like Elon recently confirmed in a podcast, I think it was a TED Talk actually, where he confirmed that most of his tweets, if they're happening in the morning time for his time zone, he's probably writing it on the toilet. He uses Twitter the most while he's on the toilet in the morning, like legit. He confirmed it. So he might just be messing around. He might just be trying to troll people,
He might, or maybe he's stoned or.
Hey, wake and bake. More power to Elon.
So if you guys remember, one of the catalysts. Now, if you looked at a chart at the time, you would have seen some major bearish divergences in some of the momentum data for the charts, which is usually a pretty distinct signal that something's about to pivot directions. So in this case, around the April timeframe, you started to see these clear bearish divergences. And by May, those bearish divergences became reality when the price really started to drop. I think it started to drop in April and then really started to tank in May last year. May 13th of 2021 was when Elon announced that Tesla would no longer allow people to buy Teslas with Bitcoin due to environmental concerns, which honestly at face value makes sense, right? Tesla's entire shtick is environmentally friendly. You probably remember this, like everyone was just blaming Elon on the price tanking after that. Everyone, and even I remember, I was like, why did you tweet that? I hate you. Even though I kind of also love what you're doing. I hate you at the same time.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember all the narrative that kind of sprung up around that, which was the move to like verifiable green Bitcoin. And, Elon, I think, even commented on how it might, maybe it wasn't his comment actually, but something related to a thread that he posted or a tweet that he posted talking about how we could potentially see a dual market out there for Bitcoin, right? It's the dirty Bitcoin and then green Bitcoin, and maybe there's a premium for one type of Bitcoin over another. I thought it was just really interesting how much chatter, well, one or two or, tweets in general from Elon can cause. But really though, I think his impact on the market, he can kickstart, right, movements, but it has to come with sustained follow through from folks that believe his narrative, right? And I think from that perspective, for me, I'm hesitant to just blame Elon or credit Elon for any price action, because really, when money is involved, emotions come into play, right? And I think it's a little bit unfair for folks to kind of glom on and emotionally, rally behind him or try to tear him down, because at the end of the day, that he just ends up becoming an outlet, whether it's positive or negative, for all this emotional energy from being happy about price action, really depressed about price action. Maybe I'm a little bit sensitive to that, being at the forefront of a DeFi project and having to bear the brunt of some of the sentiment that's out there when price action goes bad. But I have a hard time believing that he can really truly move markets in a sustained way, right? I think he can kickstart movement, but I don't think that it's just him and his tweets that are completely moving markets, especially these days. There's just so much liquidity. There are so many more connections between the crypto world now and the equities markets that really there's more to it than just Elon.
Yeah, there's more to it, but there's something to be said. I remember this distinctly. So if you weren't around in late 2020 trading into early 2020, like into January, it was a wild time. Like this was to me, in my opinion, January into February. Maybe I remember we had that big correction then, but definitely like January, December, maybe even back into November. To me, that feels like the last real bullish period in the market. Everything after that was a little bit less exciting. Even if the price went higher, the energy was starting to fade. You could feel it. You could notice it. But I remember waking up that morning and I was like staring at my phone. My wife was like, why are you awake so early? I was like, Elon tweeted something about Bitcoin and it just went crazy. It was a fun day. Remember that, because that broke through key resistance level. Didn't that set a new all-time high at the time when he had that first tweet about, hey, we bought $1 billion in Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In that example, what I'm saying is his tweet had kickstarted that move, but you need everyone else on the sidelines to follow through on that. It can't just be the Elon army. Yeah,
because some of the other tweets he's done in the past after that have definitely, they spiked and then they sold off immediately, like within hours.
Right. So I would say the spike is the army, right? And the rest of it is follow through in either direction. Do you remember though? Do you remember how pissed Elon got? Well, I imagine him being pissed. I don't think he ever tweeted that he was pissed, but do you remember how I picture him just being so mad about the Dogecoin price action during SNL, his Saturday Night Live skit? I thought that was hilarious because he's probably sitting there like, oh, I can move markets. I'm a god. And he goes on SNL and it's all just going the wrong way. And I can only imagine, right, for his ego's got to be super big and it's justified, right? He probably got a little bit butthurt on that one, to be honest.
That was a fun night. If I was going to hedge my bets, if I was going to go into a meme coin, not financial advice at all, I'm a complete idiot. Don't trade what I say. I would still probably hedge my bets on Doge. I love Bananos. I always want to shout out Bananos. So, I make sure to mention them every podcast. But from an investment strategy, just because Elon is kind of crazy and crazy rich, he's whatever he has planned for Doge, I don't know. He's gonna link him up to a satellite. So he's gonna have it on Twitter. You got Vitalik's on the board for Doge. Like, I don't know what's planned for it, but it's got to be big things. You have some of the richest, smartest men in the world associated and supporting and helping shape the future of a meme coin. I mean, you can't ask for more than that.
Let's play it out this way. I tend to agree with you. The way I look at it is, what if it was a brand new or an early token or altcoin, Dogecoin, right? What would you be looking for? You'd be looking for active development, a solid team that's developing and leading the project. You'd be looking at ecosystem to see, what the opportunities are out there for Dogecoin. And I think if you look at it, just focusing on kind of those two metrics, right? There is development going on, and there is really some good brain power now invested into the project from a leadership perspective, right? And when you think about from an ecosystem standpoint, you have Vitalik, you have Elon, like the network that these guys have access to can stand up an entire ecosystem overnight, to rival perhaps even UST and the Terra Luna ecosystem. From that standpoint, I tend to agree with you on Dogecoin.
Mm-hmm.
As dirty as I feel saying that, because a year ago would have probably been crucified for that statement by the circles I travel in. But it's a different world, right? And is Dorsey involved in Dogecoin as well?
I'd have to look again. I'll look though, because I am curious. I'm not a guy that is ever a proponent of meme coins, not even a little. I normally recommend avoiding them unless you want to have fun and just hang out with bananas because it's a great community. But Doge, I just think there's a lot of fundamentals kind of quietly lining up, and given Elon's track record, man, I don't know.
Well, the only thing that is concerning is the supply. But I mean, hey, if you're thinking to turn something into a globally accessible asset, then maybe you do need that crazy high supply. So maybe it does make sense.
And that's subject to change, like anything.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, hasn't SHIB been burning a lot? That's one way to kind of cheat the system. Burn your supply. If you can't get more buyers, burn supply. Makes less tokens, makes them more valuable in theory, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you own 1% of the supply and you burn, half of it, all of a sudden, you own 2% of the supply. Great, right? It should be worth more.
This one I liked. This one was 24.9 thousand upvotes. So we're starting to drop a little bit. In the last few were closer to 30s or over 30s. This one is, my daughter is dating a douchebag. Pardon the language if anyone's offended by that, but
is douchebag a bad word?
I don't know. I try to be respectful when I can. So this one's from September of 2021. Basically what the guy says, I don't know where I messed up. I taught her well on what to look for in a man. And then the guy shows up at the house rambling about DCAing into SafeMoon. And this is so well timed because of the recent, we'll call it the expose. There's a CoffeeZilla, I think, on YouTube. He did a nice expose on SafeMoon, and what a absolute rug that is. And I'm not shy. I apologize if anyone feels offended by how I describe SafeMoon as a rug. I'm sorry. I love you. But at this point, it's pretty clearly, those guys have been stealing from you for the past year. I remember, I don't know did you see this, mister? I remember they did their first live stream. I think it was a conference or something they were at, and a lot of people tuned in, and it basically, this is my perspective, Poppy's perspective. It reminded me of if you walked into a frat house, into a drunken party, and asked some dude that was a financial major in his first year of university to talk about this new idea of SafeMoon. Is what it felt like when I watched that broadcast. And I thought, boy, I am not touching that project with a 12-foot pole.
Yeah, no, I don't remember that. I didn't watch it myself, but definitely sounds like red flags.
Yeah, I really encourage people to watch the CoffeeZilla expose. So give the guy some follows. I mean, he deserves it. He did a lot of work on that. And it's kind of disturbing. I mean, there's like layers of exploitation there. Multiple people exploiting it, multiple people profiting horribly, extremely from, skimming, not just skimming, like we're talking tens of millions of dollars probably. And it's a shame. One thing I love in crypto, that's why I'm here, is community. I love community. The project could be struggling, the project could be mooning, doesn't matter. You find the right community, people will endure the best and the worst. And I love it. Since COVID, I mean, that's why I stuck around, the space when COVID hit and I was stuck home at home all day and I was looking for something to do. And I started that's when I first joined Discord. I wasn't a fan of Discord before that. Just Reddit a little bit, Twitter a little bit. RCC is where I really found my home and made a lot of friends. And so you can't discount community, right? And SafeMoon definitely had a heck of a community. And so I respect that, but the guys running the project clearly don't have any respect for their investors, is my opinion, not, legal, official advice or perspective there. Yeah. I just think it's funny that months and months ago, way before this expose, someone's calling them out. So the next one, this will be the last one, and we'll move to some questions. This one really got me worked up. I remember this. You probably remember this too. So 25,900 upvotes. This is from Dwez1337. Leaked documents show that Citadel CEO lied under oath about collusion between Robinhood, stopping trades, and Citadel. Do you really want them to control your crypto too? This was at peak. Well, this is referencing the peak meme coin time. So if you guys remember when Wall Street Bets was organizing all those short squeezes on different meme stocks and meme coins, but mostly meme stocks like GameStop.
Well, mostly GameStop. Yeah.
GameStop for sure. AMC as well. And some others, but the CEO of Citadel Securities was was basically the company that was was shorting GameStop or shorting some of those. I think AMC and GameStop for months, and they were the ones getting squeezed by Wall Street Bets. And normally, I'm just going to say it, and I'll probably get crucified for it, but I'm not a huge fan of Wall Street Bets. There's some interesting stuff that comes out of there, but the short squeezes I respect, even if on the back end quietly there's some people that made a ton of money that weren't one of us. They weren't retail traders. There were some big names that made some money there.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the institutional players, got in on it and made a nice chunk of change. But I remember this going down, and I'm still mad about it, actually. Oh man, there's so many things to be mad about, I guess.
There is.
Explains why I'm so tired always. Just I'm always mad. But it's maddening because what's happened to Ken Griffin? He was the CEO that lied, right? And there's documentation that proves now that Vlad, the head of Robinhood, and this dude Ken Griffin, that they had communications, right? And that they did collude to manipulate essentially the trading to help out Citadel. I think, it's really, I think, sad, forget being angry. It is just sad that the level of accountability that applies to regular folks tends to apply less and less the higher you go up in the food chain. And that's just wrong. But I think what's interesting to see is Robinhood price action as well, because they're public now, right? And their metrics on user retention and monthly active users and the volume that they're generating, because for Robinhood, volume that's the only way they make money. I think it's really telling what the general market perception is of these guys. So good on the market, good on everybody listening to this podcast. If you've, played a part in if you went short Robinhood or, you were holding Robinhood and you sold it, I think, it's not financial advice, but yeah, Robinhood can go F themselves. We'll leave it at that.
At the same time, we'd love to have you on. We love to have everyone on here.
Yeah, Vlad, let's go.
Criticize.
Let's talk. Ken Griffin.
But yeah, Robinhood definitely tanked since then. And I like to think in my head that a lot of it was, the crypto community, the OGs, the people that have been around for a minute, telling all the new Robinhood traders to get off there because, one, you didn't own your coins, and two, I mean, they were literally conspiring with hedge funds to take your money is what it boils down to. And man, that was so frustrating. I remember they were like, yeah, we're gonna have to shut things down. We need to help. We need to help our billionaire friends out here.
Yeah, the people that need help, right? The billionaires.
What a joke. What a joke. What a joke. What a joke. What a joke.